actually made a long video discussion about the TNA Knockouts, and unfortunately it was kind of cut short. They had some sound issues, some microphone problems, and really it cut off pretty much everything I said. So it's unfortunate, but now I'm back to kind of try to fill that in. I was going to say that there was a period of time when TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling Impact, had, they started out, they were just this kind of weekly pay-per-view, indie, asylum-based, program, and, they really didn't have much in the way of women's wrestling. It was much more like a continuation of WCW. So they were still kind of in that Night War mindset, trying to be like WWE, or trying to be different, better, competitive, but over time, and it was due to, I think, the interactions of a certain behind-the-scenes guy. I forget his name now, but it wasn't Vince Russo. It was someone else. But anyway, he promoted the idea of women's wrestling. So you had Awesome Kong, of course, it was Amazing Kong, outside, and she was briefly Karma on WWE, even though she really didn't wrestle any matches. She was just in a Royal Rumble and was eliminated very quickly. But Awesome Kong was a monster. She was so much larger than the other women, and she was the perfect villain. She had the $25,000 challenge. She would challenge people from the audience, and of course they were always plants, but people would come out and she would just destroy them. And then Gail Kim, stepped up to the plate. She was this young, beautiful woman. And, talk about diversity, having your top heel be an African American and your top babyface be Asian American, or Canadian. So anyway, so you get these two women with this feud, this wonderful feud, the David and Goliath, the, young woman fighting against the, unstoppable force that was Awesome Kong. And, I just loved those matches. And that was like, 2007, 2009. And by the time Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff came in, apparently there was the idea that no, the women need to go back to the background. Now, in that time, you did have some other characters. You had the beautiful people, Lacey Von Erich, Angelina Love, Velvet Sky, and at times, Madison Rayne. And they were kind of these, like, trashy, sex appeal, modeled, kind of like the divas, the mean girls, the bad. But I mean, they were not the only characters. They were not just people that relied on the looks. Actually, I think Angelina Love much better on the microphone than Velvet Sky. Velvet Sky never that good. And Madison Rayne, looks like she couldn't hurt a fly, but I respect her for the work that she did in the independent wrestling. I think that a lot of times the knockouts were misused, and they were barely paid anything. But there were some times when they were not just treated as a joke, as a sideshow, but they actually were, they always say that this was the most viewed segment on the show, and not just because, they're sexy women. It was because they were good wrestlers, and they had good storylines, and they respected the craft and the art, and they were treated with, dignity. I mean, yes, you had male wrestlers that were all about, their looks and not about their abilities, but at the same time, you had wrestlers that you really believed they were tough, and strong. Someone like Samoa Joe, just kind of a large, kind of, a sweaty guy, but, he was like, he's a threat. He can really do damage. He's really powerful. I gotta watch out for this guy. Or AJ Styles, like, wow, this man can defy gravity. Maybe he can't talk very well on the mic, but, he can do these amazing moves. And just to see him in action is just a joy. And at the same time, in the women's division, you had that. You had wrestlers that you really thought, were, worthy. You believed that Awesome Kong couldn't be stopped, that she could take down a man, her own size. You really believed that Gail Kim, had the fighting spirit to take her out, And it wasn't just the beautiful people, they were just one small part. Hamada. Ayako Hamada was in there briefly, and here's this Asian, Mexican wrestler from Japan, coming in, and she was allowed to do what she does, doing those amazing moves, these amazing aerial moves. And yes, she could barely speak English at all. And they tried various segments with her, they never quite did it very well. I mean, I would just say, just have her speak her native language and just put subtitles. Why not? You know, instead of making it look like she doesn't know what's going on. But I mean, her moves in the ring, she was clearly, skilled, amazing. Whether it was a large crowd or a small crowd, she would always just give it her all. And I really enjoyed seeing Ayako Hamada in Shimmer. Just an amazing, amazing woman. I greatly miss her. So many Shimmer wrestling women were actually part of TNA at one time, or they just, in briefly, and even today. Mia Yim, who is Jade. Um, Sienna, of course, was Allison Kay. And Laura Dennis, of course, was Cherry Bomb. And then you have Rosemary DK, or she was Courtney Rush. So many wrestlers. And, Daisy Hayes made a brief appearance at one time. Sereena Deeb, back and forth. Of course, she was more WWE, a straight edge society, but still. Madison Rayne, of course, was formerly Ashley Lane. So many TNA wrestlers have appeared in Shimmer, and so I was just loved it seeing these wrestlers. Even though I felt the stuff they did on TV was still not quite as good most of the time as what they did in the independent or live shows, but still they were treated with respect, dignity. This was much better than the divas in the WWE. After the well there was a time in the Attitude Era where, they did have some good wrestlers. Molly Holly, Trish Stratus, Lita, but, and China. But after that, they had so many that were just these models. It was all about their looks and not about their wrestling abilities. Very, very short matches, hardly any moves. They were just treated like a joke. And yes, there were wrestlers like that. And I think the Knockouts division suffered a lot. You had a lot of wrestlers that really, there just wasn't much going on. They were just terrible. But I think there was a very good period. So if you go back to old matches of TNA, I would say 2007, 2009, anything with Awesome Kong, Gail Kim. I mean, even when Gail Kim made her comeback and she was a heel, I mean, it was still good to watch her. I mean, she was still very talented, even though her matches were very short. And there was even a period where they had, intergender matches, and, they were very good. There was Awesome Kong took on a man in a tournament, um, and Gail Kim versus Tigre Uno, and so a luchador, and then Awesome Kong against what was his name? That reality TV guy. I forget his name. He was just kind of the bulky guy. It was all about his looks, prima donna, but Jesse Goddard. Yeah, that was his name, Jesse. So anyway, but so those were entertaining matches, and it was like, okay, the women lost, and you could see why, but the stories were told in different ways. Tigre Uno is a face, and it was all about he's a gentleman. He doesn't want to hurt this lady, but she's challenging him. It's a legitimate fight, and so he takes her down as best he can. But she gives him a run for his money. He has to be very strategic about beating her, and so it looks like he still comes away, looking like a good guy. And then with the Jesse Kong match, it was like, he's a cheating jerk, and he's just getting more and more angry because he doesn't take her seriously, and she keeps just flattening him, and he's trying, and he's throwing himself around the ring and hurting himself trying to hurt her, and finally he has to beat her by cheating, and it's the best he can do, and she's just furious, and it just came off really well. So I mean, it can be done. A lot of people think that intergender matches don't work, but, Lucha Underground begs to differ. Chikara begs to differ. Japan, Mexico, they all do it. It can be done well. But anyway, the Knockouts division, very good for a period of time. Not so good more recently, I'm afraid. But, they have brought in a lot of Shimmer talent. And I'm actually excited to see some of the more recent matches now that Courtney Rush, DK, Rosemary, DK, DK is now the name of the faction, but she's Rosemary. Now that she's doing more, and Mia Yim is out of the dollhouse, and she's not just kind of a giggling schoolgirl that hits people with chairs and stomps on them. She actually does moves in the ring, and Allison Kay is allowed to do more. Although they did have Jessica Havoc in there for a while, and it's just it has its ups and downs. That's kind of TNA in a nutshell. They have some good stuff and some really bad in between. They just, I think the WWE kind of has the same problem, but WWE has so much more money and manpower. They can, I think, bounce back from mistakes much more easily than TNA can. When TNA screws up, they lose millions of people, they lose millions of dollars, and people get fired. Whereas WWE, they can screw up, and people just stick with them because of brand loyalty. So, TNA, I wish them well, but mainly I'm a fan of the women wrestlers that they have, much more so than the brand. If all those women went to NXT, well, guess what? I'm watching NXT. And the problem is, those are 1, 2, 3 minute matches, but except for the pay-per-views. But there you go. So check out TNA Impact, but look at the old stuff and tell me that it's better than the new stuff, because I think it definitely is.